Chapter 1: The Medical Kingdom and its Lowly Subjects. I spent the first few years of my career in the medical field, believing wholeheartedly that I could change it for the better. Preparing for a career in nursing, I learned about drugs, Latin names, shorthand. Nothing I could have learned about in the functional prerequisites to nursing, however, could have prepared me for some of the stark truths I would encounter. On the job in the medical office, I saw people dying, adults and children alike. I saw doctors and nurses lying to patients and laughing at them behind their backs. I saw too many numb, overworked, and underpaid nurses. I saw an orchestrated money machine built to abuse and take advantage of weakened patients. Quantity and the increase of the flow of money were primary. Care, compassion, and respect for the dignity of the suffering, these are things I did not see to any great degree. I chose to do my externship at an oncology clinic because I believed I could help cancer patients. When I witnessed the monopoly between chemotherapy, death, and doctors, I felt ready to abandon my dream of becoming a nurse. One particular situation that upset me was the way x-rays were handled in the office. At school, I was trained in the calculations of radiation versus body weight ratio. When I arrived at the clinic, however, my instructions were to give everyone the same megadose of radiation because it took too much time to calculate the figures. This horrified me. I felt guilty every time I did it. I even questioned the head nurse about the effect of too much radiation on a cancer patient. This elicited a look of enervated shock rather than a revelation or understanding. Not only did she not care about what I had to say, but I was warned that I would lose my job if I did not just do what I was told to do. I was 6 inches taller than that head nurse, who had a wall full of certificates of honor and recognition, but after speaking with her, I felt like I was only 6 inches high. I specifically remember her watching over me from then on, carefully making sure I gave an emaciated 90-pound, 70-year-old woman a dose of x-ray for a person of 250 pounds. The contributions to humanity I planned to make were now senseless dreams. After this encounter with the head nurse, I kept getting in trouble for taking too much time with the patients. I had to get them in and out more quickly and efficiently. Most of these patients were elderly and using walkers. I would hold their hand, I would get them some water, I would ask how their day was. Regardless of my individual effort, it was more like watching cattle standing in line to be slaughtered. The saddest thing was that these patients really believed, or should I say, wanted to believe, that the doctors and nurses truly cared and were committed to their recovery and wellness. My time at the oncology office finally expired when I got up enough nerve to question one of the doctors. I noticed that several patients who were coming in for chemo lived on the same street and had the same type of cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They were all coming in on different days, and I did not realize until later that this was arranged purposefully so that they would not see each other. Alarmed, I took this information to one of the oncologists thinking, honestly, that he did not see this incredibly important connection. I said, "Doctor, I don't think we should be letting these patients just come in like this, and that we should let them know that they live on the same street and they have the same cancer." This is when this doctor, an elderly, miserly man of science, looked down on me with tight furrowed eyebrows joined in wrinkles of anger, pointed his long bony finger at me within an inch of my eye and said, "We will do no such thing, and this is none of your business." I felt like I was working for a Nazi death camp. The doctors were milking these patients dry before they died. I was being viewed by my superiors as inferior busybody, and I was getting the cold shoulder from everyone there but my dear patients. Many of them looked forward to seeing me a few times a week, and they would bring me cookies and little gifts. While I felt honored to be part of their lives, it was painfully evident that the system was truly useless and utterly broken. Since my hands were tied when my externship was over, I decided to go work in a pediatric clinic, hoping to be able to accomplish my dream of helping humanity there through children. But the pediatric clinic proved to be even more disturbing than the oncology center. Instead of older people with difficult conditions coming through the doors, there were frightened, innocent children and parents who were anxious and ill-advised and seeking. One of my jobs at the pediatric clinic was to give vaccinations to children. This was a heart-wrenching job, and I quickly learned I was nothing more than a henchman for the doctor. The first thing I did not like to do was to lie to the patients, saying that the doctor was in his office when actually he was outside smoking. That proved to be trivial compared to what I was about to witness and experience. The children was a lot different than practicing with water shots at school with my fellow students. In the office, I had to hold the children down while they were kicking and screaming. I had to forcefully inject them with a myriad of carcinogenic drug compounds. I quickly learned that this was the most unpleasant job there could possibly be. Wasn't I supposed to be helping people? Looking into the eyes of small, beautiful, helpless babies and physically harming them is a terrible thing. In order to do it, you have to be completely, utterly convinced that what you're doing is the right thing for the well-being of the child and the community. Perhaps therein sits the root of my burgeoning problem. The first time I saw a child have a severe reaction and go into anaphylactic shock, I was shocked myself to find out that no one gave a damn in the office. The doctor would not, or should I say, he refused to report the reaction or any reactions to the CDC. Furthermore, it was known fact in our office that we had to cover for the doctor and the drug companies. This meant that when the patients of children called our office from the hospital, we, the nurses, had to do everything in our power to convince the parents that the SIDS, encephalitis, or whatever disease manifesting from the was not because of it. I saw this happen 3 times. Each time the doctor was standing next to the nurse who was on the phone, prompting her about what to say. Another time, the nurse blamed the parent for signing the consent form, saying, well, you signed it, you signed that consent form, and you are not supposed to vaccinate your child when they are sick. You know your child better than we do. It was at this point that I started to catch on that that piece of paper I was having people sign was not to help the parent become aware of the chance of a reaction, but the paper was basically another loophole created for the drug companies to eschew any liability for killing and maiming children. I was taught in school that when you give a vaccine, you have to write down exactly where on the body you gave it. Write down the batch number and then initial it. This was a standard practice that was set in place in case there wasn't a reaction. The meaning of these reports went far beyond bookkeeping. These important reports to the CDC would ensure that all from the manufacturer would be pulled and remade. The term for that caused a reaction was called a hot batch, quote unquote. And under a report of a hot batch, there was supposed to be a hot batch alert in place for the protection of American children. Unfortunately, working out in the field, this was farthest from the truth of daily practice. The first time I ever asked the doctor to report a reaction, he replied, "What reaction?" This is the same doctor who was courted extensively by the wealthy drug representatives who were always coming in and out of the office, an endless procession. This is the same doctor who I was made to lie for over and over. More than that, I had to lie to the patients, and daily, ultimately, I had to keep lying to myself. In this position, I was required to have the patients sign a paper saying that the chance of reaction was 1 out of 100. It also stated that the children were not to be vaccinated if they were sick, had a cold or a fever. I was instructed that if any parent protested or seemed uneasy, I was to comfort them and convince them, quote unquote, that they were doing the right thing for their children. Many parents would look at me and look down to the ground as if they were definitely not trusting and not listening to their inner voice as their children were being. Some of these parents had the distinct notion that what they were doing to their child was wrong. They were looking at me, wanting to trust me, but I was representing the doctor, and the doctor was representing the drug companies. The parents were scared, and they wanted to believe, or they needed to believe, that what they were doing was the right thing. Whether vaccines are bad or good for the physical body is a separate issue from even the trauma experienced by the child when is injected. I, being a complete stranger to them, have had to hold children down with my whole entire body. They would be kicking and crying and screaming in terror, begging me to stop. We would have to bribe the children with candy if they would just let us do this or that to them. The whole process was severely emotionally scarring and draining to everybody involved. One mother, who was supposed to help me hold the child's arms down as I was holding the legs, let go of her child, and the child jumped up, ripped the out of my hand and out of his leg. It was a frantic scene, and I had to struggle to actually get it back from him. Of course, the mother blamed me for being an incompetent nurse, but now looking back at that experience, she was not alone. Many parents felt uneasy about what they were doing to their children. Many looked white and pale and afraid. The idea that they had to hurt their child to protect them, they needed someone to blame. This guilt was so great on all of us.